Welcome to the new version of Kronos, our city's timekeeping software. This video will show you everything you need to know to fill out your time card, approve and sign off on time cards for others, and the final section is for supervisors of employees who punch their time on time clocks, and it will cover how you convert any overtime hours to the proper category of overtime. Use the table of contents to navigate if you want to rewatch or skip through any sections. Now, the old version of Kronos worked best in Internet Explorer, and it created problems if you had any other browser set as your default. The new version works best in Chrome, and the new icon that we'll be pushing out to your desktops for Kronos will automatically open in Chrome regardless of your default browser. Your Kronos login hasn't changed. It's still your first name dot last name and the password you use to log into your work computer. Now, before we jump into Kronos, I just want to remind you that typing the wrong password in 3 times will lock you out of Kronos. And if you get locked out, you can call the help desk. Now, let's click on the arrow, and welcome to Kronos. Now, if you're not responsible for approving other people's hours, this will be your default screen. If you are responsible for approving others' hours, watch this section on how to fill out your time card, but also be sure to watch the supervisor section on how to navigate to your time card and also the time cards of others, because your default screen will be a little bit different. Now, before we fill out your time card, I want you to be sure to maximize this window on the right. Now, if it looks like that, where all you see are icons, I want you to click that arrow so that you see the names of those menus, because we'll be covering those in a little bit. So again, just click that arrow. Now, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a menu that should look very familiar to you, and it lets us know what pay period we're in. If you need to fill out a future time card because maybe you'll be out in training or you're going to be taking a vacation and you won't be here to submit that time card in time, you can change that to any other pay period that you need. In the new version of Kronos, you need to choose your pay code first before you can fill out your hours. So I'm going to choose salary pay because I'm a salaried employee, and some of you will have O1 regular time. And we're going to put my hours in as 9999, and maybe I'm taking a half a day off on Friday. But I don't see a second line for me to put my vacation time. So if you click anywhere out of that cell or you save your time card, you'll see that a second line will appear. And I can choose that pay code. We'll put vacation, and then I can add my 4 hours. Now, some of you attend trainings or you work overtime and you need to add comments to your time card to explain all that. So if you right-click on any of your days, it'll bring up this pay code actions window where you can click on comments and then fill in your category and put whatever information you need to put, and then you can simply click OK. Now, some of you charge some or all of your time to work order numbers. And if that's the case, you can simply go here to this transfer column and click, and it'll bring up a list of your most recent work order numbers and also a search button. And if I go to search, in this transfer window, the only searchable field is this work order number field. And if I start typing in my work order number, it'll give me a list that matches what I type. So for this example, I'm just going to choose refuse collection, and I'm going to apply that. And I'll see my work order number listed like that in the transfer column. Now, remember that every hour on that row is going to be charged to that work order number. So if you need to charge your hours to different places, make sure that you add new rows for each work order number. Now, at this point, the hard work is done. You've added your pay code and your hours, you've added any comments that you need to add, and you've put in any work order numbers. So all that's left to do so that you can get paid is to approve your time card. And this looks very similar to the old version of Kronos. Simply go to the Approve Time Card menu and approve your time card. Now, once you've approved your time card, you can't make any changes unless you go back and remove your time card approval. So if you need to make changes after it's approved, just remember that you'll get an error message until you remove that approval. I want to show you a couple of ways to view your hours. There's a little hidden menu down here at the bottom of the Kronos window, and if I drag that up, I'll see a couple of really interesting things. So this first totals window shows me a breakdown of the hours, and these are the pay codes that I've chosen. And right now we're looking at my current pay period, but we could change that to any pay period that we wanted. And there's this second window here called Accruals, which shows you all of your time on the books. Now when checking your accruals, I always want you to look at this first column, Accrual Available Balance. And let me show you some great things about this column. So if I look above, remember I took 4 hours of vacation pay during the current pay period. And at the bottom, I see that I have 416 hours on the books. But watch what happens if I click to the right of those 4 hours, actually physically in my time card, you'll see that my vacation total changes to 412. Now 4 hours is an easy subtraction, but if you have a whole time period of vacation hours and you want to quickly see what you'll have left after that vacation, you can save your time card and click to the right of the last day, and you'll see the most updated vacation total down there at the bottom. Now let's take a look at this menu on the right, starting with My Audits. Now this audit window shows every change that was made to your time card after you entered and saved your hours. So it's with complete transparency. You can see that you made changes, you can see if your managers or directors made changes, or if payroll needed to make a change. It's all listed here. Let me show you how to read this window. The type column shows any changes that you made and what type of change it was. So you can see I was playing with pay codes here and creating this video, and everything's listed. The account column shows any work order numbers that your time was charged to. The pay code field and the amount field are how you listed your hours on your time card. I think that goes without saying. The work rule column is for employees who punch in and out on time clocks. So most of you won't see anything in this column, but for those employees who punch in and out and work overtime, their supervisors have to come and convert their overtime in Kronos, and that will be listed here in this work rule column. And the comment column shows any comments that you added to your time card. And then the final column I want to point out is this user column. So you can see that I made all these changes to my time card, but you also would be able to see if someone else made changes to your time card. So everything is listed here. So I'm going to skip by this My Calendar icon because we're not using that feature of Kronos, and go straight to My Reports. Now, under View Report, this just simply shows you another view of your hours and where they were charged for the current pay period. And on the previous window, we could have changed that pay period. And then there's this primary account, which I don't think will be of use to many of you, but it just simply shows where you've been charged to since you were entered into Kronos. So mine says beginning of time in 2006. I've been with the city a lot longer, but that's when I was entered into Kronos. So this next section is for anybody who approves other people's time cards in Kronos. And you have your own section because your home screen looks different, and I want to show you how you can navigate around to both find your time card and also find your employees. And here's your home screen, and your time card can be found up here under the Workspaces menu under My Information. Now you'll see at the top of this little window that this is one of two. There are some reports that can be found if you use the arrow to scroll over, and you can check out those reports. But there's nothing really beneficial under there that you won't see on your employees' individual time cards. So I'm going to go to your time card, and I showed you in the last section how to fill out your time card, so you can review that last section for this. Now the first thing I want you to do before we find your team is make sure that this window on the right is maximized. So if it looks like that and you don't see the words, click on the arrow to maximize it. And we're doing that because the first place we're going to go is time cards. And here's your team, one time card at a time. So imagine you're looking at a stack of time cards and you're going to thumb through them one by one. And we're going to thumb through them virtually using the scroll bar one at a time. So you can check out the time and make sure that you're comfortable with how the employee recorded it, and then approve the time card. And if you're somebody who does the ultimate sign-off, you'll do that from here as well. And then you'll go to the next time card. Now there's more than one way in Kronos to find your team. And let me show you another way. Up here on the search icon, if I click on that, it'll bring up my whole entire team, and I can click on individual people, and it'll just bring up one time card. And you'll see here that the scroll says 1 of 1. And I can do the same thing, look at the hours, and then approve the time card or sign off on it. Now this last section is for supervisors of employees who punch in and out using time clocks. and it'll show you how to convert the overtime. Now, I know you already know about that process and you're used to doing it, but it looks a little bit different in the new version of Kronos, so follow me. The first thing I'm going to do is find my team, and I showed you a couple of ways to do this in the last section. I'm going to use the search icon here so I can quickly navigate to an employee that I know is a time clock employee. I'm going to click and bring that person's time card up. And you have your own ways, I'm sure, of looking at a time card and knowing where you need to pay attention. My way is to look at the totals column first, and I see that this 80-hour per time period employee worked 82 hours on this particular time period. So somewhere on this card there's going to be some overtime. And I see that on the 3rd of November they worked from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. instead of their usual 6 p.m. And for those of you that are used to doing this, you're used to seeing an additional in and out column next to the standard in and out column. In the new version of Kronos, we're going to create a new row by clicking on the plus sign. And there's my row. And I'm going to add the beginning of the overtime in that new row. And I'm going to change the pay code in the transfer column to overtime pay, a time and a half. And all I have to do here is save this time card and watch what Kronos does for me. So there's the 6 p.m. that I put in, and Kronos will automatically end their standard shift at 6 p.m. And there's the 8 p.m. that Kronos remembers that this employee worked until. So it did all that for me. All I had to do was put in the beginning of the overtime. And it doesn't change the total number of hours. This employee still worked 11 hours. And you can see it's actually 12, but it'll subtract the amount of time for lunch automatically in the total. And there you have it. Pretty simple, converting overtime. Now, when I showed you the last example, when we clicked in the transfer column, I already saw overtime pay 1.5 listed, so it was very easy to choose that code for my employee's overtime. When you first use the new Kronos, you're going to need to find that code because it won't be listed yet. So simply click on search, and then in the transfer window on the work rule tab, there are all of the codes that you can choose from. You should know which one you need to use, and if you don't, you can get that from payroll. And then just simply click apply and it'll put that code in the transfer column next to those hours. Now the last thing I want to cover is this concept of early or late punches. And this just simply means that a time clock employee punched in before their scheduled start time by a few minutes or out a few minutes after their scheduled end time. Now if you supervise employees in this position, you know that that time rounds to the nearest 15 minutes. Now we can find that under this menu here, early or late punches. So once you see that time, there are two things you can do. You can determine that either it's approved overtime, and I showed you how to convert those codes, or if it's not approved, you can just leave that time in the early or late punches bucket. Now if you leave it there, you can even put a comment in the employee's time card as to why it wasn't approved, and then you'll have that to go back to if it's ever questioned. And that's the new version of Kronos. If you have any questions related to logging in or passwords, you can call the help desk at extension 8386. And if you have time card questions or time processing questions, you can call payroll at extension 8281. Thank you.